Hello and welcome to
Conway's Kitchen is some finger licking. It's an easy way to cook.
What is up, y'all? Welcome to Conway's Kitchen. Today I want to show you how to make a hearty breakfast with potatoes, broccoli, a little fried egg on top. I know for me, my days off, I love to wake up and just make myself a nice big brunch, so if you have 40 minutes, you have some simple ingredients here, you too can make this dish. Let's check it out. Alright, y'all, mise en place. Everything we got here, all that we need. Usually, with this dish, if you don't have beans, that would be the first thing I would do, because it takes the longest. I happened to pre-cook off some beans the other day, so it's good to have beans around. It makes cuts down on your cooking time a little bit, if they're already cooked off. So I don't need to do that. So the next longest thing that is going to take to cook is the potatoes. So I want to turn the oven on here to about 425, so we can get those potatoes crispy, and then I'm going to rinse them off and cut them into little wedges. Potatoes are washed. Next thing we want to do is just peel off the little pock marks here. I like to keep the skin on usually with my potatoes, but they do have some little naughty bits here, so I want to try and find those and scrape those off. Potatoes, we're going to cut them pretty similar to how I normally cut them, where you find sort of the skinny side. We have sort of the long flat side here. This is more the skinny side here, so we're going to do one cut here to cut them in halves, and then you have nice even halves here. And then to get wedges, you kind of want them to like come to a point, so I'm going to kind of cut at an angle, which you want to have a wet paper towel here just to make sure that your cutting board isn't moving, because you are cutting at an angle. It sort of increases the danger element of it all, but if you keep your hands steady, it should be just fine. But basically you want to go at an angle through here like that to get the first wedge. And then the second one is actually just straight down, and then you have this half here where you can go sort of the opposite edge here. And then you are left with things that come to a little taper, come to a wedge. Sometimes they're not always the best taper, but the other ones are looking pretty nice. So basically what we want, to go over it again, basically 3 cuts. 2 of them are diagonal, 1 of them is straight down. So diagonal taper cut there, straight down cut here, and then on the other side, another diagonal cut to taper it. And again, tapered, 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 and a little flat. So I guess 1 out of 3 is pretty good, but yep, you just want to cut down potatoes that way. Cooking for 2 today, so I got about 3 potatoes here. Potatoes can be pretty dense and hearty, and I know I tend to want more potatoes than I actually end up eating. Oil, salt, and pepper. That's all we need to do. Potatoes aren't going to absorb a ton of oil, so you don't really need to coat them super heavily, or else you're just going to have like a big soupy mess at the bottom, and you're going to end up wasting a lot of oil. And then salt, pepper, just enough to kind of cover all the surface area. You don't want to make them too overly salty, and if it's not enough, you can kind of add a little bit of salt at the end. Actually, some garlic salt goes pretty well with some roasted potatoes. So salt, pepper, oil, and then just kind of turn them in with each other and get it all mixed around there. So salt and pepper on all of the surfaces here, and try and sop up some of that oil at the bottom as well. And then basically lastly, you just kind of want to make it so that the sides are there. You don't really want to cook on the skin side right now. You kind of want to put them face down so one of those sides can brown. Oven is still heating up. I'm going to start chopping up the onions and the garlic here and just get that ready for the saute. I haven't even actually turned on the burners because the potatoes are going to take quite a bit longer. Onions and garlic, we're not going to cook down all that long. And same with the broccoli, probably about 10 to 15 minutes there. Potatoes are sort of more in the 20 to 25 minute range. So no burners on there, but just kind of getting ahead of everything. Just going to cut up half an onion here. This would be pretty optional ingredient-wise if you're not a fan of the onions. You don't really have to add them to this dish, but garlic to me is nice little flavor boost there. Onions kind of just make it a little heartier. Feel free to just cut off both ends, and it's sort of just a rough chop that we're gonna do. Just a nice rough dice there. kind of making sort of a breakfast hashy kind of vibe, so just kind of big chunks of everything. Tupperware for this. Garlic, I'm at the last of my garlic, so this is going to be a nice fun struggle to actually get all the garlic out of these little cloves here. But start by breaking them up, and then it seems like this has mini cloves within it, but basically just hold your knife sideways here, give it a nice press, and skin kind of breaks off there. And 2 full ones there. This one is going to break into a bunch of little ones, so you kind of might have to do another little press on them. And then from there, just do the tedious task of getting the skin off. Couple cloves there. Oven cycle went off. That's when we want to start turning this skillet on. So medium heat there. Decent amount of olive oil here. And then we will put our potatoes in the oven, and spacing out the timing like that should make it so that when the potatoes are done, so is this, so are the eggs, and everything just kind of comes together at the same time, nice and hot. Butter, just gonna get it out of my way. I'm gonna cook my eggs down in butter, super optional. Coconut oil is a pretty good substitute as well, but I like me some buttery eggs, so we're just gonna start off just to get it out of my way. And put that in there, but it is for much later. And garlic here, just kind of a rough mince. Again, you can cut it however you want really, but just kind of cut it down a little bit, and we're actually going to cook it down with the onions. If you really wanted to, you can kind of cook the onions down a little bit first and then add the garlic a little bit afterwards, but we're not doing that today. It's the morning, maybe you're a little hungover or something, and you're like, so keeping it easy, Is that not what you sound like when you're hungover? Just alright, we have onions, garlic to the side, got some broccoli here, we're just gonna wash this off. Alright, broccoli's washed here. There's a good amount of stem that I want to keep some of the stem on, but this is sort of too much, so I'm gonna try and cut down around the bottom here. We happen to have a composting dog in this household that loves the broccoli, so I'm gonna hold this bit. You could also hold on to it for like a soup stock or something like that. Just there's something in there. And then with the broccoli, I do want to keep them in fairly sizable chunks here, similar to this. So a lot of that did fall off and sort of fell apart here, but I kind of do want to cut them down a little bit more. Basically, you can just find the bottom and just start with cutting the sides off, and just kind of go from there and just see how you can kind of move it around and cut down. This one's a little big, so probably just cut that in half there, maybe even cut that one in half as well. But you do want to keep them sort of more sizable chunks. Also, don't have them kiss the onions too much. We are going to cook them down separate, onions and garlic going first. But yeah, basically you can just find sort of where they diverge on the bottom here and cut from there. And then you can go up here and you can see, it diverges there at the bottom, and you can cut that off, and then you kind of just keep going around and see where the little divergence happens. And sometimes you end up with a little more butts in there. And again, composting dog, nice to have around, or just compost in general. Skillet's hot here. We can always double check by adding a little bit of double check by adding a little bit of water to our finger and just spraying it there, and you kind of see it pop up there. So we're gonna add the onions and garlic together. Little tip I'd recommend: you want to scrape off, if you are using your knife to scrape off a cutting board or something, scrape with the sharp side up. Because if you scrape with the sharp side down, you're sort of just dulling your knife as you go across your own cutting board. So just a little tip to help keep your knife sharper through time is just put the sharp side up and then scrape from the bottom there. And it'll just kind of keep your knife a little sharper through time. And we got this going here. We aren't going to really add salt and pepper until we add the broccoli later. So got that going, little lid on top. Potatoes are going to be good for a long while. Basically, we're going to wait till they brown on one side and try and flip them over. Not a whole lot more chopping to do. This is a pretty easy dish, but I have some cheese here that I'm going to add at the end. Again, optional ingredient. I like some cheese though, nice cheddar cheese with the broccoli and potatoes. I think it's a good combination. I don't, however, have a cheese grater or anything like that. I don't really like buying shredded cheese. There's a lot of like preservatives and stuff in there that I'm not a huge fan of, so I have a block of cheese that I'm just going to cut down into little chunks. Cheese can be pretty tough to cut, so you definitely want to be careful. For me, it's sort of just a little rockin' motion, because I feel like the more you try and force it through, the more dangerous it gets. So if you just kind of rock it back and forth, it'll ultimately kind of cut through your cheese. Again, 2 people today, and cheese is just sort of going to go on top to connect everything, so probably take off a good 3 slices or so and chop that up and kind of see what it comes out to be. And again, this is a pretty rough chop. You can kind of cut it down as much as you'd like, but I find once cheese melts, it disperses a lot, so I don't really need the shredded cheese. Alright, and with 2 people, you can kind of just split it up and see approximately what half looks like, and if that seems like enough cheese to you, which to me, I think that's a good amount of cheese. So no more cutting involved. Knife, gonna clean it and put it away. Checking in with this here. We don't want it to brown too much on the bottom, so just gonna kind of mix it around. Basically, we're waiting until the onions start losing a good amount of their color, and then we can add the broccoli. I'm gonna use vegetable broth while cooking down the broccoli on this skillet. Basically, I'm gonna saute it for a couple minutes and then add some vegetable broth, and it sort of does like a steam/saute kind of thing. But basically, I used to cook my broccoli down only on the skillet with like not a lot of liquid, and I found that the broccoli would either like start getting browned or a little burnt, and then it kind of gets like a little like tart and sour and just kind of like weird flavor notes that if you use some veggie broth, it keeps this from browning, and it sort of keeps you from getting those funky notes in there. But there's really not a whole lot else to do. We're kind of just waiting for, the potatoes and stuff to add the eggs. The beans already cooked off, and that's kind of like there's a lot of downtime in cooking. I'm like making videos as I'm cooking, so I can't really show you how much downtime I actually have, but like cooking my meals 2-3 times a day, there is a lot of downtime to do other things. Obviously you don't want to go too far away from like your hot food and stuff like that, but it just goes to show that, the more you cook, the longer you do it, the less time-consuming it is going to be. Because up front, it can seem like a very time-consuming task. We live in a world where it's so hard to find the time to do the things you actually want to do. But now is the time where I actually have downtime even doing these videos. And I don't normally have that, but it just goes to show that, the more you do it, cooking won't take as much time as you might expect. And now I have, a couple minutes here to just kind of do whatever, Drink that morning beer, cure that hangover. Turn it around, just so they don't brown. They are looking pretty translucent here. You can usually tell because they seem to get quite like oily as well. I mean, there's a lot of oil in the pan, obviously, but they're starting to look quite oily all around. So that seems like a pretty decent time to add our broccoli here. So add some broccoli, a little bit of salt and pepper to cover it all. And later we'll add a little bit of thyme, a little bit of chili powder, just to kind of give it some smoky herbiness to it. But we do want to cook this down a little bit, start softening up that broccoli, because broccoli is pretty dang hearty. And at this point, might even want to add a tiny bit more olive oil, just because the onions and garlic took a lot of it, and you don't want the broccoli to brown up too much. So a little bit of olive oil there, and put that lid back on. Checking in on the potatoes, kind of seeing where they're at. It's been, 5-10 minutes now. They look fine on top. Basically, you just want to flip them over. Ooh, and they're nice and brown. So that is what we want. So basically, I'm just going to sit here and try and flip all of these. So not all of them are browned up. But a good chunk of them are, and they should cook down pretty evenly throughout. So flip those over. Definitely want to put them back in the oven though. Got the broccoli here, want to check in on it. Seems like the green has changed color quite a bit. There's not a whole lot of oil at the bottom, and that's okay. Previously, like the way I used to cook, I would either just like try and add more oil because I was afraid of it burning, or I'd add a bunch of cold water because I was afraid of it burning, or I'd just try and do all these things to like sort of counteract what was happening, and it sort of just ended up making my food taste a little watery or just like too oily or something like that. And that is ultimately why I like adding vegetable broth. It sort of adds flavor and liquid simultaneously, so you sort of keep the structure without everything burning and getting like weird flavor notes throughout. So we are going to go ahead and add just enough to kind of cover the bottom to kind of get the steam going. That's sort of the last of my box there, and that seems pretty good. And when we do this, we're also going to add our spices here. So a little bit of thyme, just kind of spread it around, maybe a pinch and a half or so, and some chili powder as well. Again, just kind of spread it around a little bit. And with all those together, give it a good stir. You can see that the veggie broth is starting to kind of bubble and boil a little bit, which is great because it's going to release all that steam, which is going to help cook the broccoli and get it nice and soft. So, got that there. Put that lid on. You can use whatever type of bean. I like garbanzo beans a lot. Like, I'll just sit here and just eat them by the handful. I also kind of like them with like potatoes and broccoli, just kind of texture-wise, flavor-wise. I think garbanzo beans work really well, but basically just, we're adding them later, but I kind of just want to get stuff out of my way and sort of think ahead, so I'm going to scoop some out, portion it out. Again, 2 people today. You don't want to make it super bean heavy, but the beans are going to complement the dish and add some protein and stuff like that, so probably 2.5 scoops. And if you saw my kitchen basics video from the other week, you'll see that I'm using this little ladle here with some slats in the bottom so I don't have a bunch of that bean water. I don't want the bean water in my food, so good to have around. And again, it's just so I can kind of get ahead of everything, put this away, leave this off to the side. You can see from underneath there's a lot of like condensation on top. You can also see the bubbles is boiling underneath. Basically, I just want to stir it around just to make sure it doesn't burn or anything like that, because even though there's like pockets of water, there might be like a part of something that's just stuck on the skillet and might burn over time. So keep spreading things around probably every 2 minutes or so. And already just that little bit. Everything's a lot softer. It's a little soupy at the bottom. Broccoli's getting pretty close. I'm going to crack the lid just so a lot of that water escapes, but we still keep a lot of the heat and stuff in there. And let's check back in with the potatoes. All right, potatoes. Basically, if you can shuffle them around and they seem pretty crispy, give them a little poke. Getting pretty close there. You can check the other side to see that that's browned. Yeah. These potatoes are basically done. Broccoli and onions are basically done, which means we are almost done, ready to eat. I'm basically going to put those back in the oven and turn the oven off. And I sort of just use that as like a staging thing, just so the potatoes stay warm, but they don't keep cooking a whole lot. Probably a good time to try the broccoli, see where it's at, since the potatoes are basically done. Kind of give us an idea as to when to turn on the eggs. I just had a little piece of broccoli. It's still a little firm, so I ended up putting the lid back on. You can see a lot of that liquid is basically all gone, but I do want to try and trap as much because I do want the broccoli to be steamed. And if you've ever steamed broccoli before, it can go from like pretty firm to like really soft in just a few moments, so you want to keep a good eye on it just so the texture is sort of where you want it to be. Been just a few moments. Good way to test the broccoli if you don't want to eat a bunch of it. You can take a fork and start poking it a little bit, and it's already so much softer than it was even just like a minute ago. And that's basically around the texture you want. Again, this is going to kind of cook as we're cooking the eggs, so I'm going to put these eggs on, frying them up today. Medium heat, maybe a little above medium heat. If you're doing scrambles, probably about just below medium. Fried, more hot and fast. Scrambled is more low and slow. Butter's almost heated up. Now is a good time to add the beans. They're already cooked, so you don't really need to cook them more. It's more just a matter of heating them up and kind of letting the flavors join a little bit. Beans are also pretty cool in that, like, even though they are cooked, if I were to leave it for like 5-10 minutes, they probably wouldn't cook down a whole lot more. Like, they're not gonna get super gross. Butter is sizzling, so got a couple eggs here, got a hard countertop here. You want to hit them good, but not obliterate them. And you want to get a good crack in there. You got to find the middle ground. So we got a nice crack there. And basically, you take your hands and kind of pull it apart. You don't want to squeeze in too much, because if you press inwards on them, you might crack your yolk. So if you like them over easy, over medium, it's going to be really hard to get a yolk if you crack it. Eggs don't really take a whole lot of time, so now is when I'm going to start plating stuff by getting these potatoes out of the oven here. They're still nice and hot. And this cheese, I'm going to just kind of throw in here with the broccoli garbanzo bean mix, and that'll melt down very quickly. I'm actually going to turn this heat down a little bit as well. And yeah, we're almost there. Ooh, don't get the cheese. Don't lose my cheese. Precious cargo. Yeah, just kind of spread it around a bit there. Put that lid back on. Those are gonna melt. That cheese is gonna melt in a second. And got some potatoes here. Just kind of split it up into two different portions. See, even I added a little bit too much oil here. You can see there's sort of just extra. I guess I'm kind of gross and I would reuse this. I would just put it back in my skillet to use later. But it just kind of shows that if you do end up dumping it down your drain or whatever, it's just kind of a waste. So potatoes, go easy on the oil when they're in the oven. Eggs here, you don't want to flip them a bunch of times back and forth. So basically we're going to try and cook them on one side as much as we want and then just flip it the one time, similar to a hamburger or something like that. They're looking pretty good. I think these are ready to flip here. Spread them out, flipping, all about confidence. I used to work as a cook, cooking eggs all the time, so got it down pretty good, but I also did waste a handful of omelets and stuff by trying to flip them and having it all fall everywhere. So if you ruin your food, it's okay, it happens to all of us. This is, ooh yeah, nice and melted. Yeah, I'm excited. All right, so eggs really don't need that much longer. I like them over medium, so a little runny, but not super runny. Give them a little poke, still a little jiggly. There's a little bit of firmness, but probably about 10 more seconds there. Since it's only about 10 more seconds, basically we're just gonna top this cheesy broccoli goodness. Oh yeah, baby. Alrighty. And we got eggs. One and two. All right, y'all. That's it. Got it here. It's a easy, hearty breakfast. It's easier if you have the beans cooked off already. You can always add a little smoked paprika or some hot sauce or any sort of garnish on top, or you can just kind of cut into it, let that yolk drizzle out, and enjoy yourself a nice breakfast. See you next time.